Welcome to the Raw Spotlight podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders in the B2B space and share their unique stories. Let's get started with the show.
Hey, welcome to the Raw Spotlight. She's Got Hustle, the podcast where we shine a light on bold, fearless women who are redefining what it means to hustle in business and life. I'm your host, Emily Au, co-founder of Ready Artwork, designer, marketer, and entrepreneur. I'm passionate about highlighting the diverse journeys of women making an impact. In this podcast, we spotlight women hustlers from B2B businesses, niche markets, major brands, local ventures, and public sector organizations. Our guests share their strategies, success stories, and how they overcome challenges. We explore how they master their craft and balance passion with purpose. Whether you're building a business or leading a team, if you're looking for real talk and motivation from women who hustle, you're in the right place. So get comfortable, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the Raw Spotlight. She's Got Hustle. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Ready Artwork. We deliver uniquely tailored B2B digital marketing services to facilitate the long-term growth of your business. At Ready Artwork, we combine data-driven insights with innovative design to help your business succeed in the digital age. Our team of experts specializes in SEO, digital advertising, web development, and email marketing. We're here to help companies discover growth in unique and unexpected ways. To learn more, visit readyartwork.com and request a free proposal. Let Ready Artwork discover your business's full potential. Today, we have an incredible guest lined up. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Maggie So, founder of Glasshopper Services Inc. Maggie leads an outsourced finance and accounting firm, helping small businesses streamline operations and make strategic decisions. With a focus on people, processes, and planning, she blends technical expertise with a human touch. Maggie is also an executive and leadership coach, combining her love of psychology and business to help leaders refine their management style. As a businesswoman, coach, and mom, she brings a wealth of insights. Today, we'll explore her entrepreneurial journey and how she's growing her coaching business. Welcome to the show, Maggie.
Thank you, Emily, for that lovely intro.
How are you today?
Good. Glad it's Friday and glad to be chatting with you.
Yeah, and thank you again for joining me today. It means a lot to me for you to come on to my show. I know we've known each other for quite some time. Our professional paths have crossed a few times. I want to just say a decade, but probably more than a decade. But I've never really had a chance to really dive into your career and your journey. So I'm really excited to learn more about it today.
Yeah. I don't want to date ourselves, but we've known each other for a very long time, and I'm glad that we're getting a chance to kind of do a one-on-one chat. I enjoy kind of every time we've worked together, Emily. I learned something from you, and it's always been a pleasure.
Right. And same. I think we've learned a lot from you, and I've seen a lot of hustle coming from you as well. So I want to have a little snapshot of that journey. So Can you share the story behind the founding of Glasshopper Services Inc? What inspired you, to start your own firm?
Yeah. So, a lot of the decisions I've made around my career and business actually stems from my childhood. So I was raised by my grandma, and my grandma was a Chinese immigrant, didn't speak a word of English, didn't drive. So growing up, a lot of times I had to make a lot of decisions on my own, for good or for worse. I reaped the rewards from good decisions, and I suffered the consequences when I made poor decisions. But that was just a natural part of me growing up. So, when I graduated from college, I knew kind of deep inside that at some point I wanted to work for myself. What I'd be doing, those details I didn't quite know yet, but that was, my North Star. So I ended up working, at a number of different small businesses. My first job out of college was working with, it was like a one-man, company, a mediation practice. But, you learn a lot when you work at a small company. I was doing everything from making sure there's enough coffee in the coffee pot, when our clients came, all the way to helping, my boss plan, how to run a training course, right? So I was exposed to a lot of different things. And then, naturally, my mom owns an accounting firm. She's been running that for 35 plus years now. Her dream was always for me to take over, right? Like a lot of parents, they want
Yeah.
their child to take over.
Yeah.
And so I ended up working with her at her firm for 4 to 5 years, I would say, and realized no, not for me. Definitely not what I, want to be. That context, her company specifically, it wasn't something that I wanted to take over.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the turning point in my career actually was when I took an internship at a software company. So this was 2013.
Mhm.
And there was this huge kind of romanticism around software companies at that time, right? And I was, no different. I wanted to be a part of something exciting and new and fresh. And so I did an internship there. They were paying me, I think like they offered me, $10 an hour at that time. And I was like, done, I'll take it. Just let me get my foot in the door. And I ended up working there for 3.5 years, almost four. And I would say, I could write a book about what has gone down there. Like I advise anybody who's figuring out what to do in life, definitely join a startup at some point, if you can afford to.
So you
And
can
then
learn what not to do.
exactly, you learn what not to do,
Right.
actually, probably
Right.
more than what to do.
Right.
um, but that company ended up being acquired, and I was at a crossroads. Either I joined the acquiring company, and they were a public company at that time, and be one of maybe 1,000 employees or something like that, or I can go off and kind of try doing my own thing, whatever that meant. And I chose the latter. And I didn't really have skills. The only skills I had was finance, accounting, business. And so I thought, okay, why not give that a go? And one client became two, two became four, four became eight, and so on and so forth. And just I just got very lucky, and 7 years later, here we are, and
That's great.
just incredibly lucky. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I actually didn't know that full story behind that. I know little bits of it, but
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense now. Uh, but were there any, challenges that you encountered very early on when you're, starting up? And if there were any, how did you, navigate through them?
Yeah, absolutely. For those who know me, we had what I call Glasshopper 1.0, where like I mentioned, one client became two. Eventually, we just grew a little bit out of control, and I did everything wrong. Like anything you can think of that could be wrong, I did that. I did not know how to lead a team. I didn't know how to scope, engagements well. A lot of times I, over delivered, sometimes over promised,
Mhm.
and eventually just got so burnt out that I decided, it's not for me. Maybe I'll just go get a 9 to 5. The money was great, but anybody, it felt like I was doing 2 or 3 jobs, and anybody who does 2 or 3 full-time jobs would make great money, right? And so I let all my clients go, let the staff go, and decided I'm just gonna get a job. Went back out there and applied to maybe 2 or 3 jobs, and ended up always at the last round, but being told I was not good enough,
Oh.
and they went a different direction.
Mhm.
And, that imposter syndrome, definitely nags at you. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't find a job that I think I would enjoy. So let me give this another go, but let me do things differently, just everything differently. And that was 2019, I would say. And so this is Glasshopper, 2.0. And I'd like to think that I've done quite a few things right this time, learn how to lead a team, or so I like to think. Learn how to scope, engagements better, not perfect, but better. And learn how to use processes so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time for every client, and hiring better, right? That's a key kind of issue that I think a lot of small businesses run into, and I'm no different. Um, hire better people who are more aligned with my core values and the company's core values. And life has been much easier. Business life has been so much easier, once I kind of corrected those mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, we have the honor of working with your team. I think, yeah, you have a great team. So
Thank you.
you're
Thank
definitely doing something really well for 2.0. So,
you.
and I didn't realize that
That
it
means
was
a
just
lot.
since 2019. So,
Yeah, it was a painful kind of up and down journey. But I'm very comfortable with change. And so if something's not working and I know I need to change, I tend to bias towards action. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Comfortable with change. I think that's important.
yeah, yeah.
So, in your experience, like what common financial mistakes do small businesses make that you might have seen, and how can they avoid them if it's even possible
That's
at all?
that's a great question. And it all depends on the company and the context. But some common themes that I run into, number one is over optimism, I would say. And by nature, entrepreneurials, you have to have that kind of optimism and these big goals, right? But when it comes to your financials, that's where you want to have a real you want to put a mirror to your business and say, this is what's happening. It's great that you have these goals, but let's look at what it is, not what
The
you want it to
reality.
be, the reality. So that's one common pitfall. And so what I tell folks is, look, just have your team or have an advisor, somebody do a sniff test. So if you think, if we do, let's say 2 million this year, but next year, based on your projections, you're going to do 5, innately there's nothing wrong with that, but then my sniff test would be, okay, well, what are you going to be doing differently so that you're not doing 2 again, you're doing 5, and you have to kind of share the logic behind that. And more often than not, you're going to find that a lot of the logic is just couched in optimism, right? So being more realistic with your numbers. I would say another common pitfall is folks, especially in a small business setting, they don't really know how to interpret what they're seeing. So a profit and loss, a balance sheet, a cash flow, maybe someone built you a financial model, but how do you tie that in your day to day? What exactly do you do with, right? So a lot of folks, and to be fair, a lot of folks that we work with are not accounting or finance, folks. If they were, they be starting up a accounting firm, right? And that's fine and fair. And so I think having a foundational knowledge about, okay, how to use these reports to guide me in my decision making, that's a skill that I think all business owners and leaders should have. Another common pitfall that I see with financials is, this happens a lot in small businesses, is owners tend to funnel a lot of personal expenses in there, and it muddles up the financials. Um, a lot of times it's for tax purposes. I get that, but you really want a clean set of financials that really truly represents what's happening in your business. So to the extent that you can, exclude those. Um, so you really get a good sense of if things are going right or things are going wrong. So, those are a handful of things, but every company will have their own challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, set goals, but be realistic,
Be
right, with
realistic.
your financials. Um, be financial literate or acquired a skill to be, at least as a
Yes.
small
A
business.
basic understanding. Yeah.
Right. And then also financially separating your personal and business finances. I think, yeah, I think as small business owner myself, I think we had our fair share of learning lessons learned there as well over the years. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are great advices. Yeah,
Yeah.
that, yeah, 100% agree with you on that. So maybe looking into your leadership and coaching a little bit. How did you transition from running like a finance firm to becoming an executive and leadership coach? How did that pan out?
Yeah. So part of it, again, kind of ties back into my childhood. I've always been fascinated with the human psyche. At the same time, I'm, interested in business. And so at one point in my life, I wanted to be a therapist, but the grass was always greener on the other side, right? Oh, but I also like business. And when I'm in, business, oh, I kind of wanted to be a psychologist. And so I always straddled these two sides of me. And what I found is when I'm working with clients, half my job, after you go through the financials and you help them interpret, the results, half my job is actually, being a coach to the owner or the founder or the executive. Because numbers don't lie, but numbers don't have context, right? It doesn't come naturally with context. So when you dig into, okay, what happened here? We did great or we didn't do so great. What happened? You're going to hear them just open up about, well, this happened and this employee did this and, our client did this. And I found myself, okay, putting myself in more of a coaching, position and helping them process those things. Okay, what does it mean? So this happened. And then what? What is it about your leadership that kind of influence the situation? How can you as a leader influence the situation to be different? How do you want the situation to be, right? These are things that as busy executives or busy owners, a lot of folks are owner operators, right? So not only are you the owner, you're also in the work. They don't have time to really sit back and reflect on, oh, what are we doing here? What is the objective here? How do I get from A to B, right? What is the blueprint to get there? Is my team equipped to do that? They don't have time to think about those things. But I would argue that's probably the most important thing you can do, in a business, is figuring out the business model and kind of your leadership style so that you could take the team from here to there. And so, my clients have always been telling me, oh, you're like my business therapist. And I was like, oh, well, maybe there's something here. And I started to tell clients, well, I do this, the accounting stuff, the fractional, controller stuff. But by the way, I also do leadership coaching. And some of my clients decided, okay, let's give it a try. And for a number of those clients, I think there has to be a certain connection for it to work. I'd be lying if I sat here and said every person would work well with me, right? Or I would work well with every person. You have to have a connection. And for those that I do share that connection with, I'd like to think that I'm fairly helpful in helping them achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There has to be some chemistry there, right? Obviously, from business, it needs to make sense, but
Mhm.
from person to person, there needs to be a little bit of chemistry for you guys to have
Right.
synergy. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess also having insight of their financials will give you a little bit more clarity on how to lead them a little bit better and coach them a little bit better too, I suppose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people when they think of coaching, they think of this, fluffy thing where someone, sits here and asks you a bunch of questions and you kind of figure things out on your own.
Right.
And to a certain extent, that is part of what coaching is. But you're exactly right, because I see the financials and I have those in-depth discussions with folks. I also have a different lens and I can
Right.
see things from their side as well. So I try to balance kind of the more conceptual, like, hey, asking questions and guiding them to figure out the answers. I balance that with like, okay, sometimes I'm like, okay, based on what I'm seeing, I recommend you doing this instead of that. So a little bit of both, kind of more consultancy, and a little bit more like coachy and guide.
Yeah. You have a very unique perspective that I think most business owners or operators may be, not seeing. So I think that's very valuable to businesses out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. What key qualities do you think make an effective leader? And how do you help your clients develop them, as you're, trying to coach them?
Yeah, that's actually a very complex question. It sounds simple, but I always like to say there's a million leadership books out there, a lot of different frameworks. You can go down a YouTube rabbit hole about leadership and management, how to do it, best practices. But if it was so easy to read a book and watch some videos and become a great leader, then the world would be full of great leaders and managers. And we all know that, unfortunately, that's not the case. So for me, I think it's important. Number one, self-awareness, right? As an individual, you have to understand, what am I good at? What am I not good at?
Mhm.
What do I enjoy doing? What don't I enjoy doing? Where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, and how my behaviors actually land, right? A lot of folks, have a good understanding and good relationship with themselves, but I think part of my job as a coach is really putting that mirror and saying, hey, from what I'm hearing from you and what I'm seeing, this is how it's landing. And self-awareness, I would say, is probably one of the more important qualities
Mhm.
a leader or a manager should have. Secondly, I think someone who understands, um, I call it the equation: autonomy plus accountability equals ownership.
Mhm.
Right. So if you work with the staff, and we hear this all the time, I want so and so to take ownership of something. I want so and so to just, take it and be accountable for something. And the question is, okay, do they have the autonomy to make the decisions, and are they accountable to certain results or expectations? If you have someone who's accountable for something, but they don't have the power to make decisions
Mhm.
for good or for bad, right? It might be different than how you would do it. Then morale is going to take a hit because
Yeah.
they're accountable for something that they don't quite have control over. On the other side, if you have autonomy but not accountability, then you have someone who is directionless. They're doing all these things, making good or bad decisions, but they don't know if it's a good or bad decision because they don't know what the accountability is. So number two, a good leader, I think, can balance that autonomy with accountability with their team. Um, and that's something I think it's not intuitive sometimes. When we say take ownership of something, it's not quite intuitive what that means exactly. Um, the third quality I think a good leader would have is, you know, understanding how to build and receive trust.
Mhm.
That was a poor way of saying it, but trust is a two-way street, right? So what a lot of leaders naturally, tend to do is they bring someone on and they say, okay, earn my trust, right? Whatever that means, earn my trust. But I think a lot of leaders would benefit, at least the ones that are successful, I think, ask themselves the question, okay, why would this person trust me to be their boss, to
Yeah.
be their leader? They're working 8+ hours a day with you. They could be potentially working for someone else, but they decide to take your lead. Why should they? Right. And I think a lot of folks would find success in leading their team if they ask themselves those questions. And some of these questions are innately a little harder, right? Nobody really likes to sit there and say, well, yeah, why should this person follow my lead? And
Right.
you might have things that come up that are unpleasant, right? But if you don't address those questions, you're going to have a hard time dealing with the team. I think someone who's comfortable seeking and giving feedback. This one's probably a very common one that you'll hear. I think a lot of folks tend to they hide behind the veil of constructive feedback when it's more criticism, right? And I don't remember the last time I worked harder for someone or someone I knew felt a morale boost when they're criticized by their client or by a team member, by their boss, right? Usually it's more like you hear criticism and then you have a lot of defensive talk.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is an art and there's a certain way to receive and seek feedback so that things are on the table, right? You might not be able to fix everything, but at least you're aware as a leader, right? That these are things that are, issues at the company. So aggressively seeking and receiving feedback, that is a quality that I think would benefit a lot of folks. Let me see what else. One more kind of guiding principle I would add is, especially a small business, you need two things to be successful. One is you need a good business model, and it takes leadership to figure out what that is. And secondly, you need good leaders. If you have a poor business model, but you have a good leader, it's like carrying a big rock uphill. On the flip side, if you have terrible leaders, but a good business model, that's where, I say it's kind of like you're falling downhill and then that big rock is just falling right after you, right? You don't want that. So good leaders also have a good pulse on, what the market wants. How do we structure, how we do things to align with that and kind of keeping that big picture, front and center. With the team as well. So those are a handful of things, but each person will have their own, will bring something unique to the table. Right?
Yeah, those are really good. I personally resonate a lot with the trust that you mentioned. It goes both ways. Mutual trust, you got to trust them and they have to trust you as well. And then also really resonate with the communication aspect. You got to communicate, and how do you receive that on the other end as well? And how do you manage that information in a professional way and a constructive way?
Yeah. And intellectually, a lot of these things I mentioned, I think make sense, but how do you execute them day to day? That's the challenge, right?
Right. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then, all the stars needs to align in the equation for all of that to work as well. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Agree with that.
Yeah.
So in your experience, or, any examples of like success stories from, your coaching practice that you can share with us?
Yeah, I have a few. I'll share one without, naming the who and the company
Yeah.
and whatnot. But I worked with one CEO. He ran his business for I think 15 years, maybe 16 now at this point, and has kind of stalled on growing the company. Part of it is because he started this company at a young age, and the last 15 years, this is all he knows. And, he also learned through trial and error. And so his issue when he came to me is, I need structure, right? And that's something I hear a lot actually from small business owners, structure. He's a brilliant guy. His mind goes 100 miles per hour. And so in talking with him, I realized, okay, brilliant guy, so many thoughts, so many things he wants to execute, but my job is to help him now hone in on, okay, well, what exactly are you trying to accomplish here? Because we could do, all these, 999 things, but what exactly are you trying to accomplish? And helping him kind of get to that point where he says, okay, I want to exit in 3 years. That's actually what he wants.
Mhm.
And we go, okay, well, in that case, then, 500 of these things actually probably is not conducive to that objective. Now let's look at these other, remaining things. And through my work with him, we started to narrow down, okay, here's the services, here's the products we need to have. Here's the R&D that we need to start doing now. And here's the financial picture that we want to achieve so that we have a certain exit by, X number of years. And then this is how the team needs to be structured because we're trying to do these things. So you see kind of this cascading list of to-dos, right? Once you have the objective, what you're really trying to accomplish. And that is actually the hardest part, I think, is figuring out what exactly am I doing here? Most of us, we want to grow. We want to make more money, right?
Right.
But that doesn't really help you in deciding, okay, well, how are you going to make money? There's a million ways to make more money. And so I worked with him for now maybe a year and a half. So we were very clear on what the objectives are. We're very clear with what the team needs to look like. He's still trying to put the people in those seats, but we know what the seats are. What products and services, need to be shut down or need to start up. And what do the meeting cadences need to be, right? Do you meet with the team, once a month, once every other week? And then we implemented a recurring agenda. So every time he talks to the team, here's, what you guys talk about. Here's what you share. And then one-on-ones, how do you run those effectively, right? So we've kind of figured out a system that works for him. Right. So if I take that system and apply it, let's say to you, Emily, it might not work for you. So a lot of the work that I do is understanding that person and figuring out a framework that works, in that context. And now, I from my perspective, he is very clear about where to spend his time and when to spend it. And the team's relationship with him has I think improved quite a bit. So I don't know I don't know where the finish line is. So I would say it's been successful. We'll see if he exits in the 3 or 4 years time span that we set as a target. But I think his day to day is definitely a lot less crazy. A lot of times owners do a lot of busy work and mistake that for being productive. And so for me, it's aligning, okay, the work that you're doing, CEO every day, it's productive, meaning it's moving you towards that bigger picture. You're not just answering emails and being busy.
Right, exactly.
So, I'd like to say that he's definitely improved, on all fronts there.
That's really cool. And just a year and a half, that's big progress. I think that's a really good case study that you shared. So basically, you're really guiding him and coaching him along the way, discovering, what his goals really are, and you're really putting in processes and cadence of meetings or internal structure to kind of help guide him there through this process.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially take that visionary mind and put some structure to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a year and a half, that sounds like a lot of progress that has been done.
Yeah. Well, I would say for folks who, proactively reach out for coaching, to a certain extent, they're open to change, right? Versus someone that you kind of
Valid. Yeah.
convince to coach, then
Right.
those you kind of see a longer kind of evolution process. But for folks who reach out to me and say, hey, I want to change, you see a lot of quick, their evolution happen sometimes very quickly.
Right. They're a lot more open-minded to try things out.
Try things out. Yeah, exactly. Do something different. Right.
Right. Right. Okay, let's maybe dive into maybe work-life balance and personal life a little bit. So
Yeah.
as a businesswoman, coach, and a mother, right? How do you balance all of that? Like, I'm not a mother myself, so I really admired, a lot of, families, they're able to juggle business, growing their business, the career, and, family and child. How do you do all that?
Oh gosh. I like to see life as a series of trade-offs, right? And so in this, as you know, my daughter is very young. She's turning 8 months this week, super young. And for me, I've always known what, again, my North Star is. Look, I grew up, my parents were both not present. And it was hard. It was hard growing up, just figuring out things on your own, emotional, growth, and a lot of things was a little bit harder than it needed to be. And, I ran into a lot of issues, mental health issues, confidence issues, self-esteem. And, for me, I've always been very mindful that, when I have children, I want to make sure at least the first, 2, 3 years of their life, that we build a solid foundation, right? With her and any other kids, if we decide to have more. So that is for me the first priority, right? So in all those things, work, personal life, family, like I'm very, very clear what is my absolute priority. And in this season, it's my daughter and my family. The previous season, it was my career, making something of myself, right? And so understanding that that is my priority, then I make the appropriate trade-offs, meaning, okay, well, now I might need to bring on some additional staff. And because, my wife and I, we had to go through an IVF process. It was lengthy IVF process, pricey and lengthy. It allowed us to have some time to really figure out, okay, how does the business play into my life, given that that's the priority? So for me, the business is a means to have some freedom, have control over my time. Um, in theory, a lot of folks who own businesses like to say, okay, I run a business so that I can control my time, but it's hard to actually be in control of your time.
Right. Sometimes the
So I'm
opposite.
exactly. Yeah. I'm sure you can relate, Emily.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm very mindful of, okay, I want to be in control of my time. So what does that mean? It means bringing on more staff. And the trade-off of that is spending more, money to accomplish that. Giving the team a lot more flexibility and time to kind of represent the company, right? So for the last, it was a 3 or 4 year journey. So in the last 3 or 4 years, I really try to build a team that can do the work, whether I'm there or not. If I'm there, it's a plus. If I'm not, it's not a minus. It's just, we're good.
Right.
And a lot of times it's finding people who are better than me at the job, right? So that's one of the things I'm most proud of the team, is yes, I can do whatever, the job is that they're doing, but each of them do that job so much better than I can. And yeah, that's, it's a jab to the ego for sure. I like to feel important, right? But the truth is, I don't have to be, and that's okay. And that's freed me up to now be, with my daughter in the middle of the day. All right. My wife and I, we have different shifts during the day, and I don't have to feel guilty about work. And when I'm at work, I don't have to feel guilty about neglecting my child or something. I'm fully present, for the most part for both. Sometimes I'm still a little distracted. But I wouldn't use the word work-life balance. I'm still working, late into the evening a lot of days, but I'm happy with the trade-offs that I'm making.
Yeah.
I can live with it in this season of my life now.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to be learned there, for myself, that what you just shared. But I guess being more intentional with your time, and this time is for family versus this time is for something else, and growing your team. I think, yeah, that's very insightful. Yeah. And any advice you would give other women that's trying to juggle the career and life, family life, that is?
I don't know if I'm in a position to advise other folks. I'll
You're
share.
doing great. So yeah, there's
Thank
something
you.
to be learned. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll share, I guess, what's worked for me. Not to repeat myself, but being very clear about what you want in life. And it doesn't have to be what you want for the rest of your life, because obviously in different seasons that will change. But being honest with yourself, right? So for me, for the longest time, I wanted to, be somebody, right? Be somebody important, whatever that means. And, so I spent a lot of my time was oriented towards that goal for most of my 20s. And I have to really be honest with myself and say, okay, right now, is that what I want? And the honest answer is no. Most of the time, I don't want to be anybody. I just want to, hide behind, my computer and crank out some spreadsheets, send it out, and call it a day. Or I just want to hang out with my daughter and, watch some Netflix or something with her, right? Just kidding. I don't watch a lot of TV with her. That's not what. Don't do that.
A little early for
Play with her.
TV.
Yes, play with her and interact
Right.
with her. Don't watch TV. Um, but being honest with yourself, that's the hardest part, is saying to people, my wife, my family, like, yeah, I'm not going to be that aggressive go-getter that I was, 5 years ago. My take-home pay might be a little less than before. And guess what? I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
Like, and that's something I have to be honest
Yeah.
to with myself about, live with myself about. Um, maybe I won't grow this into a $1 billion company like I originally dreamed,
Yeah.
and that's okay. So one, being honest with yourself, and two, I would say, picking your battles.
Mhm.
When you have a team that you're relying on, when you have clients that you're dealing with, it could be your partner, it could be your family, your friends, you could let things bother you and then you just be dealing with all this clutter in your mind. Or you can say, okay, what's truly important to me? And does this matter in the grand scheme of things?
Mhm.
If it doesn't, my partner is going to tell you, I don't know if I walk the walk all the time, but that is advice I would share, right? Is, pick your battles. Not everything is worth picking a bone over,
Yeah,
but it
absolutely.
requires you to understand what the big picture is.
Right.
If you don't know what your big picture is, what your goals are, then those little things will bother you because you don't know, is it important? Is it not? Everything seems important when you don't know the big picture, right? So those two things. And lastly, when you're trying to quote juggle everything, I always come back to what are the trade-offs you're willing to accept.
Mhm. Gain
Um,
a little here, but you may lose a little bit, but what are you okay with,
what
right?
are you okay with?
Right.
Um, there there's rarely a decision or a choice you make that doesn't come with trade-offs. And you have to really be mindful of what the trade-offs are and what you're willing to accept.
Mhm.
And if all this boils down to self-awareness, essentially, and self-acceptance, right? Not only being aware of who you are, what you want, but accepting yourself. I think a lot
Right.
of women sometimes have trouble with that. Like, oh, I should be like this, or I shouldn't do that, for whatever reason. And sometimes just accept yourself. It's okay. It's okay if you're not the best at XYZ. It's okay if you're not bringing home, $2 million, this year. It's okay. Um, yeah.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. Let's maybe the last question for the future for your business. So, what are your goals for Glasshopper and your coaching practice in the next couple of years? What does that look like to you?
Yeah. So the vision, the big, crazy, wild goal, that I have for the coaching business is one day I would like to start a leadership coaching group. I think leadership coaching, there's a lot of coaches out there, a lot of frameworks, but I want to do it my way, whatever that means. Right? I'll figure it out. But that's the vision, is to have a leadership coaching group where I bring in, a lot of leadership coaches that align with kind of I shouldn't say my style, with the style I think that works for what the marketplace needs.
Mhm.
So that is the big, big dream. Step one is just me getting out there and doing more of it, right? So step one out of, 1,000. As far as Glasshopper goes, right now, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx us. We're at a good place where if we added more clients, we have the capacity to do so comfortably. Or if, one or two clients decide not to work with us, like, we wouldn't be freaking out. right? So we're in a good place, and I would let that kind of organically grow. Um, I don't know if you know this, Emily, but accounting and finance work, some people think of it as a commodity service, like, oh, it's, let me hire some person overseas and do it for $5 an hour.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, go for it, good luck. Um, but it is stressful. It requires a lot of brain energy
Yeah.
to do it well.
Right.
And, to take a set of financials and analyze it and work with a team to make big changes like that takes a lot. And so for me right now, at the level we're operating at is good. If we grow, that's great. If we don't, I feel good. Um, just because right now my focus is on reducing brain energy needed, right? The coaching stuff is much more, it comes out of me much more naturally. Whereas the accounting and finance stuff, I really have to use a lot of brain juice, right?
There's a lot of details. Yeah.
A lot of details, and then you have to take it and zoom out, which is another set of activities that require a lot of attention.
Right.
So that's the long-winded answer to your short question, which is my goal is to grow the leadership coaching practice. So that's not just me, myself, and I.
I like that.
With the accounting firm, I'm just going to let it run naturally. The team's great. They're handling things well, I like to think. Tell me otherwise, but just letting that flow, and not trying to push too hard one way or the other.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And you do have a great team. So yeah.
Thank you.
So one final question for you. What are some of your favorite tools or software that you find essential for your day-to-day work?
Yeah. So I would say one, personally, me and the team, we use a project management software called Asana.
Mhm.
Now, there's a lot of different softwares that do project management, Emily, as you know. So I wouldn't say use Asana specifically, but you would be benefiting by using some type of task or project management system, number one. Personally, I also use Notion.
Mhm.
So whereas Asana is where I track projects and to-dos, right? Things I have to take action on. Notion is where I use to build, databases of information, right? And the idea behind that is I have terrible memory and I don't want to or need to be remembering everything. That's, my brain. Again, I don't want to date myself, but I'm at that age where it's getting harder and harder to retain information. So I need a place to store it that I can easily pull it up when I need to, right? So Notion, I don't know how you would describe Notion. I guess it's one giant database software that you can customize to your heart's content,
Yeah.
is the best way I can explain it. So I use Notion. And then what else? I use Superhuman, which is an email platform where I can move along through emails much quicker. It's like $30 a month or something. So for those of you who don't mind kind of paying for that, I think it's worth doing, especially if you deal with a lot of emails.
Mhm.
Let me see what else. Yeah, my team and I, we live out of QuickBooks. So I wouldn't say QuickBooks exactly, but whatever bookkeeping.
Right.
Yeah, if you're running a small business, definitely do yourself a favor and use
Yeah.
some type of
Yeah.
bookkeeping platform. QuickBooks is a good one. Xero is another good one. And that's kind of it. I used to work in software, so I'm a big geek when it comes to software, but I'm also very mindful that sometimes there's such a thing as too much. You don't want to
Right.
build a Goldberg machine where to do one
Right.
simple thing, you have to push this button that does this thing, that does this other
You have
thing.
20 tabs open with all of your software.
No, just keep it simple,
Right. Right.
and do what works for you. So yeah, those are the handful of tools I'd suggest.
Cool. Cool. Thank you for sharing all of that with us today. And again, thank you for joining me today on my podcast. So that's a wrap on our conversation with Maggie. If you want to learn more about her business and her incredible work that she's doing, be sure to visit her at www.glasshopperinc.com. And Maggie, again, thank you for sharing your journey and inspiring us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you again for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Raw Spotlight podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.